New customers never retain at the same rate as your loyal customers.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 80, and today's guest is Bill Bass. Bill has had multiple careers. He's served in the military, he's started his own companies, and he's worked in marketing for a number of different consumer brands from Land's End to his current company, FULLBEAUTY Brands. Bill is analytical, practical, and a get-things-done type of guy, so I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. Before we get started, though, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bill Bass. Bill is the Chief Marketing Officer of FULLBEAUTY Brands. He joined them in 2019 to oversee the marketing, e-commerce, and information technology teams. Prior to joining FULLBEAUTY, Bill served as co-president of Orchard Brands, a $1 billion collection of catalog companies, president of Charming Shops Direct, general manager of Sears Direct, senior vice president of Land's End, group research director at Forrester Research, and Bill was also a co-founder of Boston.com, the Boston Globe's internet company. He's also co-founded Fair Indigo, a socially conscious apparel brand, and Black Wolf Group, which owns and manages local moving companies and home healthcare businesses. Bill has served on the board of directors of Tractor Supply Company and Ascendant, as well as serving on the boards of industry organizations Shop.org and the Direct Marketing Association. Before his business career, Bill had another career. He was an Army paratrooper and helicopter gunship instructor pilot. Thank you for your service, Bill, and welcome to the show.
No, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I have a hard time holding a job, it sounds like, or I'm old. Actually, it's the two of them combined. Once you've been around a long time and you can't hold a job, you end up with a list of positions you've held. It's like
I think if you were interviewing me for this show, it would be exactly the same way. Maybe a few more thrown in there, a bunch of consulting, as well. But I think we are peers of age in this industry. But anyway, nice to see you again. It's been a long time. I appreciate you helping out with the show. We like to get started on the show kind of with this first story. You've had multiple professional careers in the military and then in business. So is there anything kind of where you grew up, family life, that might have suggested you'd go into the military and then have the kind of a business career that you've had?
Yeah, so I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, right next to the Smoky Mountains. And my parents were both college professors at the University of Tennessee. They were very academically focused, and I was less so. And so in a fit of somewhat rebellion, I think I joined the Army when I was 17. So right when I graduated high school, I joined the Army. And the primary reason I joined the Army was I wanted to pay my own way through college. I didn't want to have my parents pay for college, and I would have felt obligated to, do well. Whereas if I paid my own way through college and I did something that got me kicked out, it's like, hey, it's my money, and I'm the one wasting my money. So the Army sent me off to college, and really at the time, I wasn't good with authority, and so all my friends were like, "Going, you're crazy to go in the Army," but it was really the only way that I could pay for college on my own. And so I had planned on getting into the Army and doing my 4 years that I owed him for paying for college and then getting out. And I got in the Army, and I had great bosses. I had great jobs. I loved it. And the Army, it's interesting. If you go to units that go get bad guys, they're pretty good about leaving you alone. And they don't mess with you. And so I had a great time in the Army. And I ended up staying in for active duty for 6.5 years. and I would still be in, except my wife started to get concerned about some of the jobs that I had. In the stuff that I was doing, there's this inverse correlation that happens between how much fun the job is and how much wives hate it. And the more fun the job is, the more the wives hate it, just because fun equals being gone a lot
Danger.
and danger and all the rest of that stuff. Yeah. And so so I got out. But yeah, I miss the Army every single day. It's the best job I ever had.
Oh, that's interesting. And like I said, thank you for your service. Appreciate all the people like you that are doing for our country. One of the things that, it's kind of the thread through a lot of the businesses that you've been in, and we'll go back to Boston.com in a second. You seem to come into a lot of brands that, are struggling a bit. And, when you get yourself involved in a business like that, do you have a playbook that you've established because you've done this a few times?
We have a playbook now. It really started with Charming Shops. So I went to Charming Shops in 2009, which was right after the economy cratered. And at that time, Charming Shops was a store-based company, had 2,000 stores spread across three brands: Lane Bryant, Catherine's, and Fashion Bug. And that was an interesting in 2008 when the banking crisis happened. Lehman Brothers went under, and all the rest of that happened. There was Charming Shops had 2 billion in sales, and their market cap was like $60 million. I was it was like going, like I could probably walk up and down my street and with a hat in my hand and raise that much money for this. So there was a real concern going on with Charming Shops on whether it would whether it would go bankrupt or stay around. And they had a activist investor come in and do what activist investors do. So he had a proxy fight, and he ended up putting his people on the board, and the CEO got fired and a whole bunch of stuff. So there's just a lot of turmoil going on. Typically, what I've found when you go into a lot of these companies, companies get into trouble. And this is it's happened. It's the same movie, and it keeps amazing me that people come in, typically private equity firms, people coming out of business school, and they think they're smart, and they go, "Hey, you need a new customer. The current customer you have is too old, too not wealthy enough, whatever. We need to reposition you." And they try and reposition the brand. And all that they do is they piss off their current customers who like the products that they have. And then they come out with new products, but the customer that they're trying to appeal to doesn't exist yet. And, they're not going to go shop at this company just because there's new product, because there's this brand image around it that it's servicing a different customer. So there's this grass is always greener kind of mentality that comes in. It says, wow, life would be easier if we just had a different customer. And so they go after a different customer, and it never works. And then there's math behind it. Mark, you've done this a long time, but new customers never retain at the same rate as your loyal customers. So you take off your loyal customers, and then you try and replace them with new customers, but new customers are never as good. Even if you did a one-for-one swap, new customers kind of, my rule of thumb is they perform at about half the level. You get about half the lifetime value out of new customers that you're getting out of loyal customers. Companies, they don't do a good job of taking care of the customers that they have, and they get into trouble. And so then we come in and we go, hey, how about we take care of how about we focus on the customers and do the stuff that we're good at? It's not rocket science, but it's just amazing to me that these people, I see this movie over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think your experience at Full Beauty and at Orchard, you've got these companies that are, we'll call them catalog, and for those, this is a podcast, they can't see me using the air quotes, but these are catalog centric companies where customers have now shifted to ordering online. And so talk a little bit about how you come into a business and everybody wants to get digital. They want to reduce their reliance on paper, and I get that, but that paper is still important, right?
Yeah, very important. although it's getting more expensive, so they try and make it less important as you can. Yeah, it's been an interesting. So I started my when I got into business, when I left the army and went back to graduate school and learned business, and then went into the business world. I started off in the newspaper business. I ended up at the Boston Globe and launched a website called Boston.com, which we launched in October of 1995, which was the exact same month that Jeff Bezos launched Amazon. And we were one of the very first newspapers to go on. I had the really interesting experience of helping design the very first banner ads. So everybody, Yahoo was up at that time, and they had their little sizes that they were having banner ads, and we were doing banner ads, and a couple of other places were doing banner ads, and we all got together and said, hey, we should come up with a common size so that the advertiser, kind of like the 15-second TV commercial or the 30-second TV commercial, let's come up with a standardized size. So we came up, okay, it'll be this many pixels wide and this many pixels deep, and we'll have 3 or 4 different options so people could do different things. It quickly became clear to me that the internet was going to be nothing but bad news for newspapers. Classified advertising is how newspapers make all their money, and doing job searches and things like that are easier to do online than they are through print. And so I left the newspaper industry and went off to Forrester Research and wrote a bunch of reports about how the newspaper industry was going to crater because the internet was going to, just shake up the business model. So the newspaper industry saw me as something of I don't know if a traitor is the right word, but probably is pretty close. That I was kind of trashing their business model. But I had a client at Forrester who was on the board of Land's End, and he asked me to take a look at Land's End. Land's End was looking for somebody to come run their internet business. And as a favor to him, I went out and looked, not planning on leaving Forrester because I loved working with Forrester. I had really great people I was working with. But I got out there and I was going, ooh, hey, the internet is nothing but good news for catalog companies, because you can reach your customer. And it's not so much people get into the say, we're going to swap out print for digital, but it's really the combination of the two. And you do each one for what it's good at. Something that's never worked very well is just taking a print catalog and digitizing it and sending it through email to the customer. Every time we've done that, its performance is not nearly as good as an email that's like personalized and geared towards that customer. Your creative people hate hearing that because they put all their heart, soul, and effort into the catalog, and they want this to be like, oh, now you can see it on a screen. But it's like people don't want to see a catalog on a screen. They want to, it's a new medium, right? It's the same way you don't want to listen to watch a radio show on television, except ESPN's done a pretty good job of making some pretty interesting radio shows and putting them on TV. So the internet has come along, and there's things that it's good at, that it's better at than print. There's things that print is better at. The thing that you want to try and do is figure out, it's like an orchestra, and your tubas can't play the flute part, and the flutes can't play the tuba part. So each one does what it does well, and you end up having some pretty nice sounding music. And that's what I've always tried to do in my career. And people I call them bright shiny object syndrome. It's like there's something that comes in the metaverse. We need to be selling in the metaverse, otherwise we're going to be left behind. 20 years ago, there was this thing called Second Life, and Second Life came out, and it was the metaverse. It was like the very first metaverse. And I had all these companies going, oh, we got to set up, we're going to be left behind because, they're building stores in Second Life. And if you're not selling in Second Life, you're going to be left behind because it recreates the physical store experience. I can go wander, I have an avatar, and I could go wander around, look at things on the rack. And I was going, this is the dumbest thing I ever seen. I go, it's a bad experience trying to recreate a store experience. Why don't you just go to the store? There's a lot of things in technology, that people get enamored with that are really distractions. And I've always found that if you just kind of focus on, what do people want? They want to have a lot of information about the product so that they can make a good decision. They want to have it so that it's easy to shop, and I don't got to click through a bunch of steps. I had one, this is like a major advertising agency. This is when I was at Charming Shops. They were wanting to work with Lane Bryant. And they showed up and they said, hey, you need to move your checkout button on your website. I go, well, this is where everybody puts their checkout button. And they go, I know that's the problem. You're the same as everybody else. You need to hide it on the page because that'll then take longer for people to find it. And your engagement scores will go up because people will spend longer on your pages. And I just remember going, you are an absolute moron. But companies are listening to you with this kind of crazy, you're not thinking about the customer experience. You're thinking about, hey, there's all this digital stuff and I'm going to talk mumbo jumbo to companies. That's where companies start running off the rails.
You mentioned something that I talk about on the show a lot, shiny object syndrome. So, you've got, I'm sure you get hundreds of emails about all kinds of technology and things. So what is your barometer? You talk a little bit about customer experience. You want the customer to get through your site quickly. Is it around metrics that you want to focus on? Is it around the payback that it would take you to implement and get back? What are the things that you think about as to say, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. We're going to take a look at it.
Let me answer that two ways. So way one, we try not to be opinion driven. We try to be data driven. We will do everything we can to figure out how to do an A/B test. So we can actually sit there and say, hey, look, this is a real A/B test. And if we do this, these metrics change in this way. So we'll look at metrics, things like revenue per visit, margin per visit. We try and pick holistic metrics rather than the subcomponents like average order value or conversion rate. If you look at revenue per visit, it's kind of, conversion rate times average order, it captures all of the different subcomponents. So we try and take kind of macro level metrics, and then we like to do A/B tests and then just compare and see how customers react, because we all have a bunch of opinions on what we think the customer is going to do, but we don't see. Now, if you can't do, now, how do you get into where we're willing to take the time to do an A/B test? Because that's an investment of time, effort, and energy, and you got to prioritize what you're going to look at. And we always have, there's like 100 things we want to try out, and we got time to do like maybe 5 or 10. So how do you sort down to that 5 or 10? I was lucky because I got involved in this right when the internet was getting started. So there was just a handful of people working on the internet. We all knew each other. And so even if we were competitors, Rich Last, who was at J.C. Penney when I was at Sears, he was a great guy. We always shared ideas. The Sears, the Penney's people hated each other, but we were the e-com guys, and we kind of had more battles with our internal people than we had with each other, right? So we would always share ideas on how to make our businesses better. I've always tried to maintain fairly close relationships with people who have jobs like mine, and they're people that I know and trust who have a similar view on, hey, let's separate hype from reality. And you get people, I got people that buy into the hype, either buy into the hype or they like to get into the IT people will do this sometimes. They throw out buzzwords to make other people feel like they don't. You have to keep hiring me because I'm the only one that understands these buzzwords, and so I have a handful of people, more than a handful, that I'll just say, hey, what do you see out there? Or we're thinking about doing this. Have you looked at this? Did you try this? And once you kind of get that kitchen cabinet of people that you can run ideas by, that's how I prioritize stuff.
That's good. It's certainly one of the things that I know has been a challenge. And you're right. You have 100 things you want to do, but only 5 that you can do. And I'm sure you've dealt with this. Every vendor that comes calling, when you talk about implementation, and in a lot of cases, you have to fully implement before you can really do an MVP, and it takes a lot of time to do that. And every vendor is saying, "Geez, it's 2 lines of code," and in fact, it takes a lot more time than that. So you need to have discrimination about what you do. So that's good.
I can tell you one thing that has helped me more than I ever thought it would. When I was at Forrester, so this is late 90s, I would talk to 10 vendors a day. They'd be pitching their stuff. It was like how to winnow out the good from the bad vendors boot camp, like every day. And so I spent a few years doing that. And now I can pretty much within 5 minutes tell you whether a vendor is worth listening to or not, just with the initial thing, just because, it's pattern recognition. They talk about, value in chess and stuff like that. You can see that if once you've played a bunch of times, you develop pattern recognition and you say, oh, okay, I've seen this happen, and the same thing with vendors. It's like pattern recognition. You do it a bunch of times. And yeah, so I would say anybody that has a chance to go to a Gartner or Forrester or any of those places where you're just talking to a bajillion vendors all the time, that's a pretty good way to build up pattern recognition.
The devil is in the details. You probably have heard that phrase time and time again in your professional life. Projects get started with great intentions, but you no longer have the time to pay attention to the little things that could make the difference between success and failure. At Details Interactive, you can discuss your business with a seasoned direct-to-consumer marketing executive who's helped launch and grow web businesses and integrate multi-channel marketing initiatives. Learn more at detailsinteractive.com. You've had a few situations in your career where the company that you were working for was acquired. As the person who was in the business that was acquired, how do you deal with that? How do you counsel people? Geez, you've had a job, you like the job, and now you're bought. Things are going to change. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I will go to my grave always feeling bad that we sold Land's End to Sears, because Land's End had a very it was one of the best or the best company I've ever worked with. It's the only company I've worked at where people genuinely cared about the customer. That was the trump card. Every company says that, but that's not, it's like, oh, but our margins will be better if we do this, that, or the other. It's like Land's End, it really was about the customer. And so then we sold the company to Sears. And what ends up happening when a company gets sold, you lose control of your destiny. And the buying company, even if they say they're going to leave you alone, there's like a gravitational pull that just keeps that from actually happening. So you get caught up in the gravitational pull of the big company, and it's going to change things. But that's life. I wish I was still 35. I'm 60 now. And you can sit there and pine for not being 35, or you can sit there and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be the best 60-year-old I can be. And that's good. That's what it is. And so same thing, if your company gets bought, you try and do what you can to keep the culture and the stuff that you have. But at the end of the day, the owners of the company own the company. And if you want to have something different, start your own company. That's what I did. I mean, after I left Sears, I started my own company. And that's the best, because you sit there and you go, okay, we have our own company and we have the culture that we want, and we're not selling to anybody else. And
yeah, so let's dig into that. I did want to talk about that. So what company did you start?
So after we sold Land's End to Sears, I kept my job at Land's End, but I picked up running Sears Direct. That's actually when I first ran into at that time Red Cats, because they were doing our Sears catalogs.
Yep.
We outsourced some of our catalogs to Red Cats. Red Cats became FULLBEAUTY, which is where I am now. And so then I was running a chunk of Sears, and then we sold Sears to Kmart. And Eddie Lampert, who was our primary shareholder at Sears, but Sears was a public company, he'd bought Kmart, and he merged these two together. And I didn't want to work in that kind of environment going forward. And so the ex-CFO of Land's End, who I'd gotten to know when we were on the executive committee at Land's End together, we got together and said, hey, let's start a company. And I said, there's two options. I go, one, we can start like another Land's End. Or I was on the advisory board of a company called 2 Men in a Truck, which is a moving company. And I said, and there's this other company, 2 Men in a Truck, that I've really become enamored with, and we could open up 2 Men in a Truck franchises. And my business partner, Don Hughes, he goes, why do we have to choose? Let's do both. So this is 2005. It seemed like genius at the time. So we started Fair Indigo, which is a clothing company with a bunch of ex-Land's End people. And then we also opened up our first 2 Men in a Truck franchise. And everything was like hunky-dory until 2008. So like first 3 years, business was great. And then 2008, we had the banking crisis. The banks pulled all our loans. And that's why I had to go back to work. Both of us went back to work. I went back to work at Charming Shops, and Don went to work at Colony Brands. And we did that because we had to fund the businesses now out of our own pocket. There were no more bank loans to be had. And so we kept the businesses going. But that's how we got started with our moving businesses and our clothing company, and they're still going. So it's 20 years later, we're still cranking along with this. So we've got about 500 employees.
Wow. So that was you guys were starting the side hustle.
Yeah. Well, we planned on it being the main hustle, and and then, it became the side hustle.
One of the things about some consistency across some of the businesses that you've been in, multi-brand businesses, and I've been in a number of them as well. Hanover Direct over the years. To your point about Red Cats, which is the predecessor of Full Beauty Brands, there's seemingly this ongoing battle of being a centralized or decentralized kind of an organization. How do you think about that for multi-brand businesses?
Yeah, and so the what you're trying to do is pick up the Goldilocks. There's things to centralize and there's things to decentralize. And you run into the same thing for like international businesses. What do you localize and what do you not localize? I used to run the international business at Land's End, and the problem that you run into, it's a little bit like bonus programs. There's no one right answer, and every answer has pluses and minuses to it. So you do something for a while until you get tired of the minuses, and then you switch to something else, and you fix those minuses, but you get new minuses, and you do that for a while. So it's like a pendulum. It kind of swings. Okay, let's centralize more stuff. Oh, we don't like that answer. Let's decentralize more stuff. And so the analogy I use, it's like a bowl, an upside down bowl, and you're trying to balance a marble on the top of it, and the marble keeps wanting to fall over to the side. So it wants to fall over to more decentralization or less decentralization, more centralization. But the optimum point is really in the middle. But the middle is not a natural resting point. It takes active work to keep it in the middle, because otherwise you'll over centralize or over decentralize. And so what we try and do is there are obvious ones. You centralize finance, you centralize shipping, your distribution center. But then you'll get some brand that goes, well, I think we should have different shipping policies. We think we should ship, 1 day shipping because Amazon's doing it. And your other brands are going, you crazy? That's going to put you out of business, right? And so you'll have this tension that goes on where people. Another analogy I use, it's like when you're your own brand, a lone brand, you're in a house, and you can design the house however you want. You can landscape the yard however you want, whatever. When you're in a multi-brand system, you're in a condo, and they're condo rules, and you can't play your music as loud as you wanted to, and you can't smoke pot out on the balcony, and you can't, there's these condo rules, and you're making a trade-off by accepting certain restrictions of some things that you can do when you're your own independent brand. But in return, there should be a payoff that you get. It's cheaper to insure the condo than it was your individual house. Or, in the case of how we've always done it in our multi-brand businesses, is we work really hard to share customers across the brands. And this is the kind of Kevin Hillstrom, no cost, low cost customer acquisition thing. And it's worked really well because advertising costs for a direct marketing company will be somewhere in the 25 to 30% of sales range. So if I can get a customer that one of our brands, say Woman Within, got to the website by sending catalogs or sending emails out, and they get to the website and then they click over to Swimsuits for All, that new Swimsuits for All customer, it was zero cost for Swimsuits for All to get that customer. And that's been for all the companies that we've been at, when we were at Charming Shops, Orchard Brands, now Full Beauty, the ability to have a common set of customers across these brands so that the brands have some affinity in the customers between them, and then being able to get the customer to cross shop, that's really been the secret sauce that's made the economic model work so well.
One of the things when I talk to companies, about cost of acquisition, where they spend their dollars, so many businesses don't know quite where to spend the next dollar of advertising. How do you help your brands think about that?
In Full Beauty, so our CEO here is a completely rational economic player. So he is all about, look, if we get a return on the dollar, we're going to spend it. So we don't really have budgets. I don't have a marketing budget that I'm sitting there trying to say, okay, I'm going to carve up my pie, and who gets the bigger slice, and my slice goes to the person that the squeakiest wheel or any of that stuff. We don't do any of that here. We sit there and we say, okay, we know what our marginal cost of customer acquisition is. We know what our marginal payback of customer acquisition, and we set it up so that that last customer is going to make us money, and the customer after them will lose money. So we set up the ROAS targets based upon our new customers coming in, what their lifetime value is by channel. We were talking earlier about Dan Hatola, and Dan Hatola has down to, okay, this type of social media acquisition channel delivers this many new customers, and so we're willing to spend this much into it. So each of our channels, marketing channels, has a ROAS target that takes into account what that marginal customer, when we get down to that zero return on the very last customer. And that's how we do it. And then we just constantly are making sure that we're dialing stuff at the individual channel level to make that ROAS. And then whatever that adds up to, that's what goes to finance. Finance guys hate it because they like sitting there saying, well, how much money are you going to spend next year? And you go, well, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
It's going to depend.
And it's, it's interesting because, again, my background is, to some degree similar to yours, having worked in, a lot of, catalog businesses, and working in one where there are stores involved, that there's also another component of where to spend, the dollars. There's a lot of businesses that still force the budget. I like to, talk about the fact, businesses were only compelled to spend what they had in their pocket. You only can spend $1,000 because that's what they gave you, even though you can confidently spend 3,000, and that incremental 2,000 is going to make you money. There's a lot of businesses that don't just operate that way. So,
and there's always a trade-off too between immediate gratification versus delayed. Yeah, how much of your money are you going to buy beans and plant the field versus how much are you going to use to pay bonuses to your employees? There's a lot of things that you're trying to figure out the investment. We try to sit there and say, look, this is our investment time horizon. It has to pay back within this time horizon, and we'll futz around with the time horizon, depending upon how confident we are, how much we want to invest and stuff like that. But once we come up with the time horizon that we're willing to do, and for us, it'll be kind of like 2 to 3 years, we feel like we can fairly confidently predict what the return is going to be on a customer over the next 2 to 3 years. You start getting out to like true lifetime values, 10 years, 20 years and stuff like that. It becomes very sensitive to interest rates and all the rest of that. So we try and take as much of the uncertainty out as we can. And then once that's in place, that's the scoreboard. We know what we're acting against. The board's bought into that, and then we go execute.
See, folks, on the Marketing Playbook podcast, we bring you new terminology all the time. Bill brought us the word FUTS. So that's a very technical term of how you massage numbers to get you the answer that you're looking for, right, Bill? Let's talk just quickly about some of the pain points that exist today for your business, which is a combination of paper and a combination of digital. Lots of headwinds in the space. What are the ones that you're most focused on?
The whole paper world, it's expensive to chop down trees, turn them into paper, print things on them, give them to delivery things, and get them out to hundreds of millions of customers. We do, I don't know, something like 300 million catalogs a year, something like that. So I mean, we got a lot of catalogs going out. Actually, it might be 400 million catalogs a year. I don't know. We keep adding brands, and so every time we add a brand, we have to crack out new catalogs. And so there's been a lot of pressure in the print industry. The post office has had challenges for a long time. It's actually, I think, starting to get its act together. But the problem is they're getting their act together by raising some of our rates, which is, I kind of wish they were getting their act together. And we're still kind of underpricing some of their deliveries. And then you've had, the consolidation of the printers. You kind of got Quad Graphics out there as kind of the lone big player now. You had LSC, which used to be Donnelly, but they've gone through, kind of serial bankruptcy kind of issues. That's a tough business, printing. Things are only going to keep going up in cost for catalogs. And so you just have to then adjust what you're doing. But we're saying it's not just catalogs. We've had costs go up in digital marketing, right? So it used to be, I remember when Google first came out, it was the greatest thing ever because it was an auction, but you didn't have a lot of people bidding against you. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts coming in and bidding against you, and our costs were going up. People going, oh, we can't afford this. And you're going, well, you have to afford it because that's the new paradigm. And we just got to figure out, how do we optimize what we're doing with Google and find other ways now to reach our customers? But we're not going to get, this kind of, you're looking for pricing discrepancies where things are underpriced, but that's just business. Over time, people get smart and those prices adjust.
And in the early days, product listing ads, were free. Shopping was free for a long time until they started to realize that was really where the main driver on Google was going to be.
And product listing ads have been a great deal for us. It's been interesting. And you still get into a company, the merchants go, this is the product I want to push. And you go, well, no, we just give Google all of our products, and then they decide which ones the customers want. And that's what they show them, because Google, they only get paid if somebody clicks on the ad, right? And so there's this really interesting tension, and it's going to continue for a while, between how much do you give over to the AI algorithm driven stuff versus your creative people and your merchants kind of, no, we need to lead the customer to what they want, they should want to buy. And that's a tension that happens in every company I've been in. And it's one that's happening literally right now. We started doing a bunch of stuff with the generative AI, where we're having product copy and actually some of the graphics and stuff like that now starting to be generated by computer, as opposed to our creative people that we love. But it's just hard to compete against something that I can write a year's worth of subject lines for emails and have 5 different variations for each one that I can then, start in the morning, and I'll send 2 or 3 different versions of the email depending upon the subject line, and then pick whichever one wins and go to that. Well, that's a lot of work coming up with all the subject lines. A year's worth of those using generative AI costs me $15. Whereas, I'm talking about a whole stable full of creative people. There's going to be a lot of change happening in that space too.
The next version of newspapers going away, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Good stuff. We're down to the end of the show, Bill. I appreciate all the information that you shared. We do this 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready?
Fire away.
A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
eToys, which died early in the internet days, but those guys were just creative as all heck. So I admire them.
Favorite app on your phone?
It's like a Boggle Word app where I can play. It takes 2 minutes, so I can always have like a little 2-minute burst of time wasting.
The last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
Made In, which is cookware.
Something that you're not good at but wish that you were?
Being skinny.
That's the first time I've heard that one. So, charitable organization that you're passionate about?
We talked about a company that I started called Fair Indigo. We have a foundation that is attached to that. When I came out of the Army, I got a degree in education policy, and I went to work for the U.S. Department of Education. And so I've been involved in education the rest of my life, been on school boards. And so when we started Fair Indigo, that was about making sure that people in the countries where we make our clothes are paid fairly. And we have an education foundation set up with that so that we sponsor the schools where they make it's up in the Andes in Peru. So there's a couple of schools that we sponsor up in the Andes, pay for the teachers and do stuff like that. So that's long been my personal passion.
I didn't know that we had school boards in common as well. I spent 6.5 years, 2 elected terms in a town in Westfield, New Jersey.
You talk about thanking me for my service in the military. Thank you for your service on the school board, because school boards, you talk about, that's the lowest level of elected politics, and that's where stuff really happens, and you can really make a difference. And
yeah, I was very pleased to have been able to do that. So if you had one superpower, what would it be?
Flying. I'm a pilot, flew for the Army. It's like the greatest thing ever.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
My paratrooper red beret.
Okay. And if people want to reach out to you on social media, Bill, what would be the best place?
I don't have a Facebook account. I don't want to know what you ate for lunch. I'm not going to tell you what I ate for lunch. So I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's my only, it's my business Rolodex, but yeah, I don't do any other social media, which is wild because I've been doing the internet thing for forever, but yeah, I've always steered away from social media.
I think you'd be great on TikTok, Bill. So anyway, thanks again for doing this. It was nice to see you. Really enjoyed the conversation. Continued success to what you're doing at Full Beauty Brands. I've got a lot of friends there, so I'm glad that it's going well.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Bill Bass for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, generative AI is real. Bill speaks about how Full Beauty Brands is using it to help create subject lines, product copy, and helping to create images. This is a great way to get more content that you can be testing to help improve overall performance within your digital business. And number 2, the shiny object syndrome. Not a new discussion for the Marketing Playbook podcast, but one worth repeating. It's so easy to be distracted by the new ideas that are out there. Bill spoke about the metaverse as one. They might be interesting, and for some brands, it might make sense, but stay focused on what really matters for your business. Focus on the details, the basic blocking and tackling, and be sure you're bringing your customers great product and an easy shopping experience. And number 3, Bill speaks about his kitchen cabinet, that group of people that he's developed over the years. These are the people that you share ideas with, ask questions of, and generally use as a sounding board for challenges that you might be facing. Cultivate a group of people that you trust, and it will serve you well throughout your career. And it's never too early to start. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.